figure that you specifically had some kind of response to why God reveals himself to some people and hides himself to others?
Yeah, my name's Tara. Basically, it's a little bit complicated, but it's related to the problem of evil. So I want to go into that a little bit. Basically, if we go back to the Garden of Eden, you had Satan had convinced Adam and Eve to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Well, and I will let you get through this. Just for clarity, we have no reason to believe that happened, and Genesis doesn't say it was Satan. It says it was a serpent. It's only later revisions that apply that to Satan. But sure, we'll go with the mythology.
Okay. So basically, in Genesis 2:16 and 17, God said that the punishment from eating from the tree was basically death. And Satan said, you will certainly not die, for God knows that in the day that you eat from it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and bad. So basically, Satan there was accusing God of withholding something that was good from his creation.
Seems that the serpent was the one telling the truth there, don't you think? Because they didn't die that day.
Well, see, this is what I'm going to get into. Because the Bible admits that when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and bad, that both of their eyes were opened.
Yeah, which affirmed what the serpent said.
Well, so this begs the question, does this imply that the tree had magical powers? And I would say no, the tree doesn't have magical powers. It was actually symbolic. When Adam and Eve decided to eat from the tree, they were essentially deciding for themselves.
So I could see the whole story as metaphorical or symbolic or whatever else. On the other hand, if you think this actually happened, then I don't know how you can write off a magical tree when you're talking about a serpent that spoke to Adam and Eve and told them what to do. I mean, where do you draw the line on? I mean, is the whole story just, did this not happen and it's just a metaphor for a fall from grace? Or
no,
so there were two people. Was there also a talking serpent?
There was a serpent that Satan was using to.
Well, it doesn't matter who was using it. There was a talking serpent, right? So we're already in the realm of magic. So why, if you're in the realm of magic, why do you get to say that it's unreasonable to say that the fruit was magical?
I'm not saying it's unreasonable to draw that conclusion. What I'm saying is, from my own personal opinion, that is symbolic.
Okay, so that's symbolic, but the people and the snake weren't symbolic.
Correct. And the reason why the name of the tree was symbolic, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, is, like I said, the tree symbolized Adam and Eve's decision to decide for their own what was good and evil, rather than relying on.
I've heard 100 different interpretations of this story, and Thomas Paine made a very good point in his Age of Reason that God would never use text to convey a message, and I think that this you're sort of playing into his argument that yeah, you can interpret this or interpret that or spin it this way and spin it that way and try to get to whatever conclusion you want to reach, but the story doesn't stand on its own very clearly because we're having to debate about interpretations.
Right, and
so it's a failure, right? Whoever wrote it failed at conveying the message they intended to fail because it's open to so much interpretation.
I'm not trying to prove that the story is true, and actually this plays a part into it too, is that it's not our job as Christians to prove things. We're here to plant seeds, and it's God's job to...
Actually, it's your job to give a reason for the faith that you have. So it is your job to prove things.
Right, exactly. So and the reason why God doesn't reveal himself to everybody actually has to do with the fact that this whole system, the reason why we have all the evil now is because during that incident, essentially what Satan was doing was calling into question God's sovereignty, his justness, his right to rule. So
what's that have to do with whether or not... So God reveals himself to some people, right?
Right.
Are there some people that he doesn't reveal himself to?
Yes.
So why is God playing favorites? Does he not love everybody and want everybody to be justified in believing him?
He's not playing favorites.
Absolutely. No. If I have two kids and I want them to pay attention to me and listen to me and do what I say, and one of them I never, ever interact with, and the other one has actually met me, that's me playing favorites.
Yes, but the situation isn't the same.
Okay.
The reason is because in order to prove that Satan was wrong in what he was saying, basically Satan was calling into question whether or not God's way of rulership was correct. And this goes back to...
I still don't see what that has to... Okay, I still don't see what that has to do with why... Let's say I'm God, and Satan dares to call into question whether or not my way of ruling was correct. If I wanted to convince everybody that I existed and that I was real and that I was just, the best course of action would be for me to interact with all of them directly, because then they have firsthand experience.
Exactly.
So if I was a God and I chose to interact with some people and not interact with others, how could I ever condemn the people who I chose to not interact with?
God's not necessarily going to condemn everybody that he doesn't interact with. And the reason for this whole system right now isn't for God to prove that he's real, that he exists, that he has power, because if Satan had called into question God's power, his existence, that would have been easy to prove. That's not what Satan called into question. So the question that God has to answer is whether or not his rulership, his direction, is the right direction.
Yeah, in order to do that, first he'd have to demonstrate that he actually existed. But second of all, even if the God of the Bible were to come out and demonstrate to me right now that he was real, he'd still have a lot to answer for before I could ever respect him.
Right, and he's going to do that. The Bible says that there's going to be a 1,000-year reign of Christ.
The issue, though, is about whether or not belief is justified. And until he does that, belief isn't justified, and certainly reverence and respect and adherence isn't justified. So call me back after he does that.
Okay.
Because until then, I don't see how anybody could have good reason to believe.
The only people that really have good reason to believe are those to whom God reveals himself.
And how do they know that God's revealed himself? Because I was a fundamentalist Christian for more than 20 years, was studying to be a minister. If you'd have asked me at the time if I had experienced the Holy Spirit, I would have said yes. But I now understand that that wasn't the case.
Most people who are Christians who have faith, God hasn't revealed himself to them. God revealed himself to a very, very select group, even in biblical times.
So you're saying that most Christians believe for bad reasons?
Correct.
Okay. And how do you know that any Christians believe for good reasons?
I mean, I can't prove that to anyone.
How could anybody prove it?
I said my purpose isn't to prove that. My purpose is to explain, like I said, why God only reveals himself.
Well, it's the only point of disagreement. We both agree that people believe for bad reasons, but you're saying that there are some people who believe for good reasons, and I'm asking how you know that.
I know that because I believe that, God has touched my life. And I know that that isn't sufficient for you, but it's sufficient for me, and that's why I'm not here trying to prove anything to you.
Could you be wrong?
Yeah, I could be wrong.
Cool.
I don't think I'm wrong.
I know you don't think you're wrong. So the question then becomes, if there's something that I could be wrong about, but I'm convinced of it, I can usually give the reasons. Even if they're bad reasons, I can usually give the reasons for why I'm convinced. And if somebody were to look at those reasons and point out that they were fallacious, that they weren't sufficient, I would be able to accept that. And so when you tell me that you've got good reasons, all I was wondering was, what are the good reasons?
I mean, it's a matter of the things that have happened in my life. My life has been steered in a very specific direction.
How do you know that? I'll tell you, because I know plenty of people who think that their life has been steered, and not just by God, but by the fates or the stars or whatever else. And surely some of the people who you and I both would agree don't have good reasons also believe their life is being steered.
Because it has been consistent within my life that when I deviate from a certain path, I'm always brought back onto that path.
Well, that's been my experience as well. When I start to behave terribly to other people, my life tends to get worse. Does that mean there's a God steering me towards better behavior?
It's more than, people treating me bad. It's more like, I don't know how to describe it. I guess I can't really describe it.
Well, the question is, how do you know that it's God?
I have faith that it's God.
Okay. Couldn't you justify any position by saying I have faith?
Yeah, well...
Which, doesn't that mean that faith is not a good reason for believing?
I don't think so. I think...
Really? So if I tell you that I believe that white people are superior to black people, and that's a position I take on faith, you're telling me that I might have a good reason?
No.
Okay, so faith is not necessarily a good reason?
Not necessarily. It can be a good reason.
How can it be a good reason if faith can be used to justify a good position, a correct position, and an incorrect position equally? How do you tell the difference? So let's say, for example, instead I said that I believe that white people are superior to black people because I rolled the dice and I rolled a 6. Would we agree that that's a bad and unreliable pathway to a true position?
Yeah.
Yeah, so faith is identical to that. You don't get to say that faith can be a good thing any more than you can say that rolling a 6 can be a good thing, a pathway to truth. You have to show that it's a reliable pathway to truth.
Well, faith is more than rolling the dice. Faith is also, when applied correctly, it's based on, your experiences in life. So
it's strange that you say applied correctly. I don't know how you would apply faith correctly. And from the Christian worldview, faith isn't even something you use. It's something that's given to you by God. It's not like it's a methodology.
And how does it change the reliability of faith?
There are people who are given faith by God, and there are people who are convinced.
So why would God give a useless gift to people?
Because it serves his purpose. His purpose ultimately right now is to prove his point. His point being that his way of rulership is the correct way of rulership.
I don't see him attempting to prove any point. How do you know that God's trying to prove a point?
The way he's attempting to prove it is the only way to prove that God's way is the correct way is by comparing it to all other ways of rulership without God. So that's what this whole system is about.
That's ridiculous. I don't have to allow every sort of rulership to be able to know which one is better than others. We can say right off the bat, without ever performing the experiment, that any rulership that cuts off the head of anybody who is part of that system is demonstrably worse without ever actually having to do it. We can think about things and evaluate the consequences and extrapolate from knowns to unknowns. It's bizarre for you to claim that the all-knowing, all-powerful creator of everything has only one way of demonstrating that he's right, and that's to let everything fuck up everywhere around so that he can come out winning.
Well, you and I can justify that, and I can see where you're coming from with that, and I agree with that.
Yeah, why is your God stupider than I am?
That's not true.
He's not true.
That's not true. But
he understands the basics of epistemology, and he understands what should be convincing, and he understands what's right or wrong, but he can't reveal himself and explain it to people in a way that would bring understanding to people. If I created a simulation game and my simulations don't understand me, am I not a miserable failure?
Actually, this begs one of the questions that Satan had raised, because when he accused God of withholding something from his creation, and he sort of did initially.
So Satan was telling the truth.
Humans are inferior to angels. Angels are inferior to Jesus. Jesus is inferior to God. Therefore, there is a hierarchy of creation, and in order to prove Satan wrong, one of the things that God is doing is Revelation reveals that there's going to be 144,000 that are picked from the earth.
Okay, now you're talking about something that isn't happening, that hasn't happened, that you have no evidence for. You're just plucking numbers out of a book. You can't know that that's happening if it hasn't happened, right? So this is just another exercise in you having confidence that this will happen.
Yeah.
Where do women and atheists fall on this pecking order?
What was that?
Where do women and atheists fall on this pecking order?
There have been people through history, women. I don't see where you're.
Oh, well, just as soon as you establish a pecking order, you can put yourself above everybody else.
I mean, according to the Bible, men are superior to women.
Right. Do you buy that?
I interpret this passage a little differently than other people.
Well, the man's the head of the household in the same way that Christ is the head of the church. When it comes to rights, the men are the ones with the rights. The women are traded around and become parts of harems, and you can sell off your daughter as a slave. Paul didn't permit a woman to teach in church. I mean, that pretty much establishes a pecking order. Or maybe a pecker order.
Well, yeah, of course. There's always an order. There is an order. There's,
Why?
Jehovah's the head of everything.
So according to the Bible, women would be at least marginally inferior to men, right? Do you buy that?
We don't buy that, just so you know.
Don's gay. According to the Bible,
be killed.
He should be killed. Are you okay with that?
No, actually, I'm a trans woman, so no, I don't.
Okay. Boy, I'm scratching my head here.
I wonder where trans women fit on that biblical pecking order. Because I'm pretty sure that from those archaic standpoints about men wearing women's clothes, which is, by the way, I'm talking about what the Bible says, not me, you're a woman, I'm cool with all that. I support all of your rights, which makes me infinitely superior to the book that you're apologizing for.
And the authors.
But anybody who did a literal reading of the book that you're advocating for would put you even lower than cis women. And then, of course, anybody who's slaves is lower than that. I mean, this is the thing is what Don's talking about. If you start going this pecking order, and you're doing it all without any justification other than, well, this is my interpretation of the Holy Book.
It's an interpretation, I believe, that I have been steered to by God, essentially.
Okay. I don't see how anybody. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that. No, actually, I'm not glad. I really don't know what to say because you think that you've been steered a certain direction by God, and this is something that you can't demonstrate. And I don't even know how you came to that conclusion
and
that
it's
it was
not even
God
to your
steering
advantage.
you. How did you determine that it's not you steering you?
I guess I can't really say that I have proof for that. I mean, that's where my faith comes in, and like I said at the beginning, I admit to, a certain amount of faith, and yeah, that might be irrational, but
for me, it's all about caring whether or not my beliefs are likely to be true. And so I can't believe something unless there's not good reasons. And as soon as I recognize that faith isn't a good reason, then I can no longer use faith to prop up what I believe. I actually have to come up with good reasons. And when it comes to Christianity, when it comes to the Bible, when it comes to Islam, when it comes to any of the religions, not only do I not have any good reason to believe they're true, I'm not even convinced if they were true, they would be good things because they advocate for so many terrible things within the holy books. And we know that religiosity doesn't make anyone a better person. And I'd much rather deal with the world here and now and how we interact and get along and how we're going to make sure that people get equal rights and that people are treated fairly under the law, and that no religion, even if it were actually correct about some supernatural realm or what happens in an afterlife, should ever get preferential treatment over any other or irreligion.
Yeah, I don't advocate for, interfering with government and all that. In fact, I stay away from government because I don't believe that my beliefs should be dictated. So I separate myself from politics completely because of that. And I don't believe in pushing my religion on other people, trying to force other people into my religion. But it is my purpose still to, spread the good news. That's part of, what I feel I've been commissioned to do. And that's,
cool.
all about spreading the word, and it's not about proving anything. Proof is with God. I can't do that.
Well, I mean, you can give the reasons. You can follow 1 Peter 3:15 and give the justifications. Whether or not you're successful at proving it's different. But really quickly, because I'm going to move on to some other callers, what is it that you think is the good news, as briefly as you can?
The kingdom of God. You know, it's all about proving, you know, Satan was a liar when he called into question God's sovereignty, his right to rulership. So God's answer to that ultimately is going to be his kingdom, and that's where proof is going to be available to everybody.
So you can't talk about, so the good news is that you're convinced that something better will happen some other time because Satan, who told the truth in the myth, was actually lying.
Yeah, I believe that good news is right around the corner. I know you don't accept natural, and you were just talking about the natural occurrences like earthquakes and stuff. But there's a storm brewing, you know, with Trump and everything. I believe that everything is starting to come to a head, and things are going to shift drastically in the near future.
Okay. Thanks for I mean, no offense, but you hear those sort of vague predictions every single year from all sorts of people. And so basically you've called in to say you're convinced that the good news is that something better is coming that you can't demonstrate.
I mean, yeah, essentially. And for what it's worth, whoever picks up on that, you know, God will, I believe, latch on to those seeds and do what he needs to ultimately, the ultimate reason why he interferes at all with the system, because if he interferes too much, it's essentially him corrupting the data, and it's God's purpose that this experiment not happen again. So
that's garbage. That's like a parent saying, I'm not going to do any parenting because that might corrupt the data. The fact is that a God could demonstrate to every single person on the planet that he clearly exists and what his intentions are, and not actually force anybody to follow along. Do you believe you seem to believe that there's a Satan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so do you also believe the mythology that would say that Satan was one of God's angels?
Yes.
Yeah, so Satan, in your view, knows absolutely about God's power and who he is and what he wants, and still chose to rebel. So that means there can be no problem with a God revealing himself to all of us. We would still have every opportunity to rebel.
And he's going to do that.
Well, when he does, call back. Thanks.
Okay.
God's going to reveal himself. What the fuck is taking so long? Jesus told some people, there are some you still standing here who will not taste death until all these things have come to pass. And 2,000 years later, now all of a sudden, hey, there was an eclipse, and there's going to be another eclipse in 7 years. So that tells us...
there's a war and an earthquake.
Oh, hang on. I talked about this a couple weeks ago. There's a family member who, because the eclipse happened in North America, and that's relevant to her, and then she finds out there's another one coming in North America in 7 years. That's the 7 years that the Bible talked about, except that there's also a full solar eclipse in 2019 and 2020. They just don't happen to cross Missouri. And there were 100 of them in the last century. There's going to be 100 of them in the next century. And oh my gosh, yes, we had one of the worst hurricanes ever, and things are getting worse. But I think the odds are more likely that it has something to do with climate change than end times, considering you can go on government websites and find out the frequency of earthquakes and the frequency of hurricanes and their magnitude, and find out that, yes, while some things are happening that are worse, shit's been bad for as long as we've been keeping track of it. It's a bunch of cherry picking to say, oh, look how bad everything is, but it's going to get better. Mm-hmm. And then God will reveal himself. Well, until he does, our position is the only rationally justified one, that we are not warranted to believe there's a God. If you say that later on God will reveal himself, cool. When that happens, we will then be justified in believing it. But when that happens, you don't get to say you were right all along, because you did not believe for good reasons. You believed for bad reasons. And you might as well have been predicting that you would win the lottery, and then if you do, claim that you were right all along. Getting lucky doesn't mean you are rationally justified in holding a belief. Thus saith the Lord.
Well, I'm a Christian, and I don't know where to start. I'm just glad I got on the air.
Sounds like you started.
Congrats on your 1000th episode.
Thank you.
That's got to be exciting. Well, I wanted to start with something Jesus said in John 14:26. He says, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name. He will teach you all things and bring to your remembrance all that I have said to you. I think what he's making a reference to is that the 4 Gospels will be written this way.
Oh, okay.
And when we look at John 16:13, he's making a reference to the epistles and the book of Revelations when he says, "But when he, the Spirit of truth, come, he will guide you into all truth."
So you found some verses and you have an interpretation that suggests that they're pointing to the Gospels and the Revelation of John.
Yes.
Okay. I don't understand what value that is, because somebody else could come up with another interpretation that they're pointing to something else. But even if you're correct, for somebody to say, I mean, Jesus could have literally said, by the way, after I'm gone, there'll be some letters written about me. There's nothing remarkable about that. There's nothing that points to the divine. And, so I have no reason, until somebody gives me a reason to believe that the Bible is authoritative, that is something that I should pay attention to, I have no reason to pay attention to it. I mean, I do, because I'm constantly talking to the people who believe it. But I don't know, maybe I just don't understand what point you're trying to get to.
Well, there's got to be there's a reason for the 4 Gospels, the way they're written.
Yes, people believed something and they wrote it down.
Well, Matthew is written specifically for the Jews, because when you look at the first miracle he did, leprosy, he cleansed the leper, and that in ancient Israel, it was viewed as a punishment for sin.
Yeah, so Matthew is over the top for the Jews. So Luke was most likely written first, and Matthew and Mark generally are viewed as adopting things from, Mark was written first, and Matthew and Luke are generally viewed as adopting things from Mark, as well as potentially a Q document or whatever, depending on which model you want. But Matthew made everything Jewish. Matthew sought out to make it appear that Jesus answered all sorts of prophecy, and goes back and even references things in the Old Testament, the Torah and the Tanakh, that aren't even there or aren't in the versions that we have. So if we're in agreement that Matthew is constructed specifically to spin this story so that it would be appealing for the Jews, what conclusion can we reach from that?
Well, I'm not saying each gospel has a specific purpose, I think.
Do you think it's important the Gospels be congruous? Do you think the Gospels should line up and agree with each other?
Well, John doesn't line up with the other 3.
My question is, do you think that the 4 Gospels should line up with each other and agree?
Well, some of them have, not all of them have the same stories on them.
All right. The stories covered by each of the 4 Gospels, would you expect those stories in God's perfect word to agree?
It depends, because we have 4 different authors. Matthew and John were eyewitnesses.
No.
And go ahead.
We have no idea who any of the authors of any of the Gospels were, but the bulk of scholarship doesn't identify any Gospel author as an eyewitness.
And it looks like Mark had 2, if not 3 authors, I believe. And in fact, Mark, I think, has 2, if not 3 endings.
Then there's secret ending, and then there's the one that ends at 16:9 and then continues.
Back at the beginning of the call, you said something interesting when you made 2 points, and you said, I think this verse says this. And then you said, well, I think this verse says that. Do you find it odd? Do you think it's if you were listening to somebody who was speaking about the Quran and they were reciting a verse that was supposed to be absolutely true, 100% divinely inspired and authored in accord with God's will, and you started the sentence about that verse with, I think. What do you say? I mean, does that sound right? Do you think we as human beings should be interpreting, or do you think the message should be clear? And you don't have to say, I think. You can say, I know the verse means this.
Well, I guess I should have said I know then.
So you know, without a shadow of it, in your mind, that these verses have a specific intent and meaning?
Yes, without a question.
Okay. How do you know that? And because a minute ago, I think instead of correcting, I think if I'd have asked, you probably would have said that you know that Matthew and John were written by eyewitnesses.
Correct.
And yet they weren't. or there's no reason to think they are because we don't know who wrote them.
Well, we know. Well, there are other. I don't know where to go with this. Mark's getting it from Peter, and Luke is getting it from Paul.
Okay, I'd ask how you know that, but the thing is, if you go look at the bulk of scholarship related to the authorship, even just within the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, and Luke are anonymous gospels. There's no mention within them of who wrote them.
And they're written in the third person.
John just says John, a disciple of Jesus. So the only reason it gets that name is because it's self-referential, but you have no idea which John that is. And the best scholarly dating of these things put them decades, even as much as a century after the events that they're talking about. So if you look at those, and we don't know who wrote them, I don't know how you could say that they were eyewitnesses when the best dating puts it in a position where they're not eyewitnesses, and they're not written as if they're eyewitnesses. And if Matthew and Luke are eyewitnesses, or if Matthew's an eyewitness, he doesn't have to borrow anything from another gospel. If Seth and I go see the same show, I don't have to read Seth's review of it, edit out clips from Seth's review, and then add my own embellishments on top of it. I can just tell you what I saw.
Well, we found the pool of Bethesda in John 5:2. We found the pool of Siloam in John 9:7. And we found the ossuary of Caiaphas, which was in Matthew 26:57 and John 18:13. So we're finding archaeological evidence every day.
Archaeological evidence of what?
Of the stories in the Bible.
No, okay. So the position here is not the Bible is a fiction and nothing in there is real or mentioned. I mean, they talk about Jesus going into Jerusalem. We know Jerusalem's real. We don't even need archaeology for that. You can't. How do you find archaeological evidence for first of all, that would confirm authorship and your view that these were eyewitnesses? But how do you find archaeological evidence that supports miracle claims or anything that would get to whether or not Jesus is divine? I mean, Russell years ago.
The Bible.
What's that?
Go ahead.
I was just saying, Russell years ago in the show came up with an example that all of us have used, which is, in 1,000 years, if archaeologists dig up New York City, that doesn't tell us whether or not Spider-Man was real.
I guess that makes sense. But when you look at all the books of the Bible, we got 66 books.
In the Protestant Bible, yeah.
Yeah. Written by 40 authors over 1,500 years.
Written by an unknown number of authors, but it's probably around that, over many, many years, yeah.
But the main theme is Paradise Created, Paradise Lost, and Paradise Restored.
Okay, so why don't we just read Milton and throw the Bible out?
Read Basics Storytelling 101.
Yeah, let's go through and read Joseph Campbell's series on myth stuff. I mean, the fact that the Bible has a narrative that is common to humanity that shows up all over the place, to me would seem to be evidence that there's absolutely nothing remarkable about it, that this is the sort of thing that we find.
Well, when you look at what Jesus said in John 3:12, he said, if I told you earthly things and you don't believe them, how can you believe heavenly things?
Well, first of all, Jesus has not shown me anything, earthly or otherwise.
Well, when you just look at the book of Job, all the science in there.
All the science. Okay, now we're tap dancing on something else.
Wait, how do we get Jesus into the book of Job? That was a little bit of a leap for me.
Yeah, and the science in Job.
I wanted to change the subject. Yeah.
Well, I can understand that, but I want to come back, if I may.
All right, go ahead.
If we have the Gospels, and if the Gospels are divinely inspired, God's perfect word, instruction manual for all of humanity, and the Gospels disagree, and I'm guessing on this show you must have covered it 1,000 times. I don't want to cover too much old ground, but I mean, the basics disagree with each other. How Jesus lived, where he went, what he said, what he didn't say, how he died, his resurrection. There are 4 different conflicting versions of the empty tomb story in the gospel. In the Gospels, the 4 Gospels. So if we know the Gospels disagree with each other and can't be trusted to agree with each other on something that is supposedly a perfect truth, do you think we have good cause then to have real doubt about anything else that the Gospels or any other biblical book might say or state or claim?
Well, we found the Nazareth inscription, which right after Jesus died, they made it basically a capital offense to steal from a tomb. So that's a good piece of evidence right there.
A good piece of evidence for what?
That they did not have an explanation for why the tomb was empty.
Okay, so I haven't looked up this story. I have no idea about the veracity of it, but I can tell you that a report that a law changed about grave robbing isn't confirmation of an empty tomb or a missing body or somebody rising from the dead that is specific to any of these stories.
And would Jesus have subjected himself to the natural law in place when he was bending the laws of the natural world to be the Savior? He would have done it his way anyway.
I hear you.
I mean, the thing is, I always try to remove yourself from, and I'm not saying, well, you can do this, but it's difficult. Remove yourself from saying, I believe this, and then looking at all the things that seem to support what you believe. And instead, look at it, you know, John Loftus's outsider test for faith. If you didn't believe, what would it take to convince you? And if the claim is that there was an itinerant Jewish rabbi that said things, okay, that's a completely mundane claim. I'm fine with the fact that there were probably a bunch of those, probably a lot of them named Yeshua even. But if the claim is that there was an individual who raised the dead, turned water to wine, healed the sick and the blind, gave these passionate messages, was killed as a heretic, and then rose from the dead and ascended to heaven, those are extraordinary claims. And they require more than the story, especially when you have multiple stories with different accounts. Even if all of them lined up perfectly and said in roughly different words exactly the same thing, that's still not sufficient evidence for this. And if that was the standard by which you felt that you could be reasonably convinced of something, then you would have to believe every alien abduction scenario that comes along. Some of those are far more similar than other things. You would have to believe, you would have to accept multiple different religions because your standard doesn't get you to which one of these is right, if any. It's just, this is the one I'm convinced of. And now it just becomes nothing more than well, I believe it and blah, blah, blah. It's an opinion.
Well, when we look at the Gospel of Luke, he was a physician, and he's the only one that mentions hematidrosis, which is blood sweating, which is very rare, the most rare condition on earth. I found that fascinating that he mentioned that in the Gospel of Luke.
Well, you know, I think it's fascinating too, because he described a condition, an event that happened. If people were being crucified and bled out, don't you think that would be happening to all of them or a good many of them?
No, well, this was before, when he was praying in the garden, right before he was crucified.
You're talking about sweating blood, not bleeding water. Okay.
Yeah, he was sweating blood, and it's actually a rare condition. It's there's a couple people on Earth that have it, but it's a rare condition. It's one of the most rare conditions.
Okay, so a rather rare condition gets reported. What does that have to do with whether or not the individual is divine?
Well, it mostly happens in death row inmates, and this was the night before he was crucified. I think that's pretty cool.
Okay, so other people on the planet who are on death row have sweated blood. So it's an entirely mundane occurrence. It may be rare, but the death row inmates that sweated blood, they're not God incarnate, are they?
No, but they're going to be killed just like Jesus was.
So what? The point is, there's nothing about that should lead anyone to believe that they're divine. I have no problem with the notion that somebody got killed. I have no problem. Well, I mean, I object to the killing. I'm saying I don't have any problem. You know, I could grant that Jesus existed, that he said things, that he was killed. And that gets us nowhere near whether or not he was raised from the dead and ascended to heaven because he's God.
I hear you. And I wanted to explain what I've been told about Abraham and Isaac.
What you've been told by whom?
By a preacher.
Okay.
That Abraham is God the Father, Isaac is God the Son, and the ram that is sacrificed is the crown of thorns that Jesus wore in Matthew, Mark, and John.
Cool story.
You believe it because somebody told you?
Well, the Bible.
All right, the preacher told you, or then you went and read it in the Bible, or both?
Well, I've always, that's an atheist objection to the Bible.
Yeah, I have a whole diatribe on the Abraham and Isaac thing, but, you know, preachers, apologists, can do whatever they like to try to spin stories so that they're meaningful to people. But in this one, first of all, I think his analogy fails miserably because it wasn't a crown of thorns that was actually sacrificed. So if the ram is analogous to the crown of thorns, it's not like he put the ram on Isaac and then killed him. So this thing falls apart at every turn. And he's trying to draw a connection between two stories. And my point is, we have no reason to believe that either of those stories are true. So there's a Blackout is one of my favorite shows. And there's a moment where Lord Percy is describing the eyes of the Infanta. And he's saying that they're bluer than the, I don't know, Great Stone of Galveston or whatever it was. And it turns out he's never seen either. And so Blackadder calls him out by saying that, so what you're saying is something you've never seen is slightly less blue than something else you've never seen. And that's what you're doing here with the Abraham Isaac story. Something that is not true and whose meaning may be questionable is barely comparable to something else that we don't have any reason to believe is true.
All right. Thanks for the talk.
Sure.
Thanks for calling.
Thanks.
I'll see you.
Let me throw this out. Look, we've mentioned this before as an example, but if you believe in a literal hell, if you hold to the verse, "Depart from me, all you who are cursed, into a lake of fire and everlasting damnation," or whatever. The idea then is that I'm God's child and I'm in a burning house. And instead of God showing up and communicating exactly who he is, what his nature is, what he wants, what I should do, personally, irrefutably, he writes a letter and then he gives it to somebody else who gives it to somebody else, and he has it translated and transcribed and passed around, and then someone will eventually go and hand it to my child who's on the second floor of the burning house. And I always thought, this to me makes no sense. Why would a personal God not want to make a personal connection that's irrefutable? Why in the world are we stuck with this book that is such a mystery and such a mess? And when people draw from the Bible, it's hugely problematic. So I don't know. I just threw that out there. Does that wash with you? Is it a bad example?
Yeah, no, it's fine. And Ray Comfort, he used to use that example, that basically we're knocking on the door telling you that your house is on fire. And I'm like, okay, but if you knock on my door and tell me my house is on fire and we go for a tour around my house and you can't point to any fire, you're just a nuisance. You woke me up because you're convinced my house is on fire. And I appreciate the fact that you care enough to get me out of my house if my house is on fire. But when we investigate, we find no fire. We find no indication of fire. We find no smoke. We bring in 5 or 6 different people, and you're sitting here telling me my house is on fire when there's no evidence for it. This person's telling me my house is flooding. And these people are going like, no, that's not right. Your house is fine. So the key is to rely on the evidence to reach conclusions. That's what skepticism is, saying I'm not going to accept this until there's good reason for it. Alex in Colorado, thanks for waiting.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Pretty good.
Okay, that's good. I'm a theist.
Okay.
I wanted to ask why you don't believe in God?
Well, first of all, I guess we could start with which God, but basically for every God that someone has presented, I have seen insufficient evidence to warrant belief.
Okay. What evidence, though?
I have seen insufficient evidence to warrant belief in any of the God propositions.
Well, what if belief is based on faith?
Then I have no use for it, because you can believe anything on faith. I can believe that you're a better person than me and take it just on faith. I can believe that I'm a better person than you, then take it just on faith. Faith is not a pathway.
But we all believe something on faith.
Okay, so first of all, I don't necessarily think that that's correct, depending on how we want to define faith. But if you're saying that evidence is not sufficient, but yet you should believe on faith, then that type of faith that you're describing, belief in the absence of evidence or in the face of evidence to the contrary, I have no use for that, because it's not a pathway to truth. There's nothing you couldn't justify with that kind of faith.
But you believe in things without evidence as well.
What do I believe in that I don't have evidence for?
Like the past, that the world's real.
I have a direct experience of the past. My belief is not the past actually occurred. My belief is I have an experience and recollection of the past, independent of whether it actually occurred.
And I say the same thing about God.
You say the same thing about God.
I have a direct experience of God, just like you can't prove the past is real, but you have a direct experience of it.
So which God are you claiming that you have a direct experience with?
Well, it doesn't really matter for this point, right? But
okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Like we all believe something on faith, right? You don't have any evidence that the world is real.
So you have a direct experience with what you're calling God, and therefore you believe.
I have mountains of evidence that the world is real. You're basically trying to go down this path that if we believe something in the absence of absolute certainty, which I would say there's no path to absolute certainty, that then we are exercising faith. And my response to that is...
No, that's not what I'm doing. You're defining my position as something it's not. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you don't have any evidence whatsoever when it comes down to it. Like when we talk about what...
I don't have any evidence for what when it comes down to it?
For the world being real. So you would cite your experience of it, but you can't prove that your experience of... Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so basically you're talking about the problem of hard solipsism. How do I demonstrate, or how do I understand that the world is in fact real? And all I can say is that I experience it, and evidently so does everybody else around me.
And I say the same thing about God, then. I don't.
No, because everybody else around you doesn't experience God.
How do you know that? What if?
Because I'm around you and I don't experience God. Checkmate.
Right, but what if my experience of God tells me that it's not true, just like your experience of the world tells you something about the world being real that you can't prove?
That's where we step outside of the individual's opinions and assessments about whether or not they're evaluating reality, and you go to independent confirmation. This is why science doesn't just rely on, hey, I saw this happen and here's my interpretation of it, therefore this is the truth. Instead, we go out and we investigate independently to see if we can consistently produce reproducible results about reality.
Right, but that's all based on some assumptions you would have to agree with, right?
So I have a number of presuppositions that are foundational because there's no other solution. Identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle. The fact that while I can't prove that I'm not stuck in the matrix, I have to operate with the reality I experience until somebody shows me a way out. But apart from that, everything else is derived from those foundational presuppositions, which are the same ones that you have to make. The problem is you're adding another one.
I don't see it like that. Like you just said there, sorry if I misquote, you said you have to believe in the world that you're directly experiences until somebody shows you a way out. I could say the same thing about my belief in God. I have to.
Yeah, except that now you are adding another thing that you're claiming that you have to believe. And I don't have to believe that until somebody shows me a way out.
I could just say that these laws are rooted in God's nature, and you're adding these things unnecessarily, and I have less.
Okay, if you say that these things are rooted in God's nature, demonstrate it.
Okay, but no, that's not the point, right? When we start talking about metaphysics on this level, you can't prove that the law of non-contradiction is true and all that, right? Those are just something.
So for let's say identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle, I presuppose them. They continually demonstrate that they are reliable within the reality I experience. However, you rely on them as well, correct?
Yes.
And you are saying that the reason they're reliable is because they are rooted in God, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That is the part that you need to demonstrate. That would require a demonstration you are going a step further than what is justified by reason.
Why don't you have to demonstrate that this
I'm not proposing that I know what the explanation for the logical absolutes are. You're proposing that, and that's why you have a burden of proof.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so I do believe that there's some evidence of God, but do you acknowledge that like most evidence, including science, is based on induction, not deduction? So it's not absolute certainty. It's something that we.
I just acknowledge that I see no pathway to absolute certainty at all, and yes, right. a lot of it is based on induction and inference.
Why are you fixated on absolute certainty? I'm curious about that.
Hey, actually, if you go back in the call, Matt was the first one to bring that up. I never brought that up.
So the fact that you didn't say the words doesn't mean you didn't bring it up.
Yeah.
When you say everybody believes things, when you say that everybody believes things based on faith, and then you talk about what you mean by faith and how you're just going to believe something based on faith, what you're actually doing is arguing that in the absence of absolute certainty, we must still make decisions. And I agree with that. The fact that you didn't say...
I disagree, but we'll just move on, 'cause I don't think
hang on. We disagree on what? Do you think that
you're defining my usage of faith as belief and without absolute certainty. I would say faith is belief without evidence.
Okay.
Okay, belief without evidence. Now it's even worse.
Yeah.
I don't think so, because
you're wrong.
I want to move on from this.
You're wrong.
Okay.
You are demonstrably wrong.
Yeah.
We all have to believe things, whether or not we could possibly be absolutely certain. We have to make decisions about what's real because we're acting. Okay. So whether or not there's absolute certainty, we have to make up our minds about things. And I would hope we would agree that there are at least some things that we can't be absolutely certain about, and yet still have to make decisions.
Do you agree that there's some propositions that you believe that you have absolutely no evidence for?
The presuppositions that I talked about don't have any foundational evidence, but they continue to provide evidence of their reliability. It's like saying, I picked up this pencil and I have no idea, I have no evidence, that this pen works. But then I start writing with it, and now I have evidence for its reliability. To say that this pen it works is different from demonstrating that it works.
You sound like a religious apologist. I could say that same thing with God. Once you pick up God and start using it, you realize that it's active and true.
Demonstrate that God...
So please, I can show you this pen works. Can you show me that God works?
Okay. Well, okay. So that's why I kind of wanted to move on from that. I do think that...
Are you going to answer the question, or are we done?
Well, I know the responses that you're going to give, so not to your satisfaction.
Well, I knew what you were going to say before you said it too, but this is a show, so maybe we should say it. Can you demonstrate God the way I can demonstrate this pen?
No, but
don't put a but on it.
The analogy is the...
I swear,
okay,
don't put a but on it. The answer is no. So don't pretend that the two are on even footing. When you argue as if they are on even footing, that is dishonest.
I think your analogy is flawed, though, because we aren't talking about the pen, we're talking about the laws of logic. Can you prove that the laws of logic are absolutely true? No?
Yeah, I can demonstrate that they are consistently reliable, and that they seem to be. There's no demonstration of anything that violates them, and any attempt to disprove them would have to assume that they were true in order to disprove them, which sets up a paradox.
Right. Okay. Okay. I would just say God's more foundational than that, but I know you disagree with that.
And how can you possibly demonstrate that?
Well, the same way you do, it's a presupposition, right?
No. I did not claim that the presupposition was the demonstration. I claimed that there is a presupposition and then a demonstration of reliability based on that. All I asked was, how can you demonstrate that God serves as a foundation for those absolutes?
Right, yeah, I can't do that.
You can't do that. So why would you believe something that you cannot demonstrate?
Well, okay, that's why I wanted to get on to my next point, because I think it can be demonstrated through induction.
I just asked you if you could demonstrate it, and you said no, and now you want to get on to your next point.
So not through that specific example, but through another argument.
So how many of these arguments are we going to entertain? Because typically people lead with their best one.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, all right. So can I just tell you what I think a God is, and then
you
can tell me if... Yep. Okay. So I believe that God is a transcendent, immaterial, timeless, spaceless, eternal, uncaused, extremely powerful entity that created the universe. Is that something that would qualify as a God for you?
Well, I mean, it's your definition of a God, so does it qualify as a God for you?
I'm saying if I could demonstrate that, would that falsify your position?
Falsify my position?
What position?
So first of all, my position is that I am not convinced that a God exists. My position is not there is no God. But second of all, you listed off a bunch of things, and I didn't get a chance to write them all down.
Okay.
But I'm presuming that you have them in front of you in a written form.
Yeah. You would like me to read it again?
Read the list one more time.
Okay. Transcendent, immaterial, timeless, spaceless, eternal, uncaused, extremely powerful entity that created the universe. Entity
or agent?
Entity. Say.
Okay, so you're not proposing that this God that you're defining is an actual thinking being?
Well, let's just figure out if this is something that would qualify as a God, and then, like, if it doesn't, then maybe I could add that.
Well, so my concern is not whether or not it would qualify as a God. My concern is whatever you define, do you have good reason to believe that that's the case?
Yeah. So I'm saying if I could demonstrate this entity exists, would that make you not be an atheist? That's basically what I'm asking.
No.
Okay, so that doesn't qualify as something that's a God.
Well, I would be an atheist with regard to your definition of God, I would no longer be an atheist with regard to your definition of God, but I would still be an atheist with regard to every other God that's been proposed.
Like if I could prove that this being exists, would you still have the show?
Oh, you just said being. I thought we said it wasn't a being.
Entity. Sorry.
Well, okay. So you've got a bunch of characteristics. One of them is timeless, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So existence is necessarily temporal. What do you say about something that exists for 0 seconds?
Well, I would say it exists eternally.
So something that exists for no time exists eternally?
Well, I don't mean timeless in that context. I just mean timeless in the sense that it's apart from time. It's not within our...
What reason do we have to think that anything could be apart from time?
Okay, because we know that the universe began, and we know that it can't begin from nothing, so we know that something has to exist apart from it.
So we don't know any of those things.
Okay, well, we can debate that, because I have good reasons for all those things.
Yeah, the problem here is this. We can't explore beyond the Planck time. And when we talk about time, we're talking about time in our local presentation of the universe. We don't have any notion at all about whether or not time is even a sensible concept prior to the instantaneous after Big Bang cosmology, assuming that's correct.
Well, we have 4 good reasons to believe that the universe began and no good reasons to believe it didn't.
We have a good reason to believe that our current local universe had an origin, but that's independent of whether or not the cosmos or a multiverse.
That's the context I was using it beside. We have 4 good reasons to think that the cosmos began and no good reasons to believe it to be eternal, so I regard that premise
I have no good reason to think that the cosmos isn't in fact eternal, that there has never been a time when the cosmos didn't exist.
Okay, but that's not... What we're talking about is no beginning, not a first moment in time.
I have no reason to think that it is impossible that the cosmos is not eternal.
Okay,
how do you demonstrate that the cosmos had a beginning?
Okay, all right. So this is what I want to do, right? So like I said, it's not like, right, we're not talking about absolute certainty, we're talking about most likely true. So if I can show the premise to be more likely true than not, then we can move on and say that the premise is more likely true than not. So I would say reasons why we should believe the universe...
No, cosmos.
Began. Sorry, yes. The cosmos began. Would be the fact that it's expanding.
You don't know that? I'm talking about the cosmos, not our local universe.
Well, we know our local universe is expanding, and that's enough for the argument.
That's not enough for the argument.
I'm expanding. That doesn't mean the Earth is expanding. The fact that our local universe is expanding... Actually, I've lost 30 pounds, so I'm no longer expanding that way. But the issue here is about the cosmos. And the funny thing...
I agree, but here, my argument just needs the universe to be expanding. Because
I don't care. That doesn't address the cosmos.
No, I'll explain why. Because something expanding for an infinite amount of time will lead to contradictions.
Except that our universe hasn't been expanding for an infinite amount of time. Our universe has been expanding for 13.7 billion years, and the cosmos may or may not be expanding. You have no way to evaluate that, or for how long, or if time even applies to the cosmos.
Okay, but we know that the expansion rate's speeding up, right?
No, you don't know anything about, what do you know about the cosmos? The only thing you can evaluate is this local universe. You can't evaluate the container for this local universe, whether it's a multiverse, whether there's some other cosmos, you don't know anything about it. You don't even know if it exists.
I don't know if what exists.
The cosmos. Maybe our local universe is in fact all there is, or maybe it's expanding in something else that you don't have any way to investigate.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I just when we use cosmos, I'm just talking about all of whatever exists, if that's just our universe.
Yes, the cosmos is what we typically define cosmos as all that exists. But you don't know what exists beyond our universe, do you?
Well, I have good reasons to think that nothing does other than something that caused the universe to begin.
Okay, so now, despite the fact that you can't explore beyond our universe, you think that you have good reasons to not only conclude that something other than the universe exists, but that the only thing other than the universe that exists is the thing that created it.
Right. Well, okay, so I'm making the argument that the cosmos began, right?
How do you demonstrate that? Because I have no way to explore the cosmos or its origins, or determine if it had origins.
Okay, so I'll lay out the four arguments just in 10 seconds, and then you can explain what's wrong with them, okay? So, like I said, the expansion rate of the universe, which you talked about,
that doesn't tell me anything about the cosmos? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, we can, okay. Borguth-Vilenkin theorem.
That has nothing to do with the cosmos?
Yes, it does.
No, it doesn't.
Well, it does. And the impossibility of infinites that leads to contradictions. So
that's three, which, by the way, I don't see any demonstration that the infinite is impossible, especially if you're going to be making an argument for something infinite.
But it exists outside of time, so there isn't the kind of
it exists outside of your infinite exists outside of time within our local universe. That doesn't tell me anything about the cosmos or a multiverse. And by the way, you only gave three, not four.
Well, no, I'm saying that a multiverse or anything that exists apart from our local regime of space that we call the universe would have to have space, right?
No. How did you determine that?
Well, what you're saying that a multiverse could exist, but it's immaterial?
I don't know what the multiverse can or can't be. I'm wondering how you made this determination.
Well, how did I make this determination? Because, if you're going to say that the multiverse is just something that's immaterial, then I just said it's a god, then I don't...
Well, see, the multiverse is a hypothesis about a broader aspect of the cosmos whereby which universes might be generated, and our local universe would be just one of potentially many. But we don't necessarily know anything about any of those at all. I mean, we don't have any ability to explore them.
Right. Well, we have no evidence of it, and I think for good reasons to think that it doesn't exist.
Well, you've only given three.
That's why, like physicists like Vilenkin will say that we almost certainly know that the universe began, and there's no way.
Yes, he's talking about the universe, and we're talking about the cosmos.
No. He's talking about all the He's talking about all the cosmos. If you read his book, The Many Worlds, he specifically says that we know beyond a reasonable doubt that the cosmos began, that there was a beginning there.
Okay.
So I would consider that premise more likely true than not.
So let's say for a second that I conceded that the cosmos had a beginning. I'm not doing that, but let's say that I did.
Okay.
How does that get us to, therefore, there's a God outside the cosmos?
Okay. So do you want me to read the quote really quick or no? Are you good?
We're almost out of time.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we would say that something can't begin without a cause, and
I don't know that.
Cause would then...
Yeah.
I don't know that. Causality is temporal, and our only ability to evaluate causality is within the temporal dynamic of our universe. We don't know how time might operate or what something else might be that we might call like time or quasi-time or whatever.
Well, so you're saying it's rational to believe that it could just pop into existence.
No, I'm not saying it's rational to believe it could pop into existence. I'm saying that the claim that it couldn't has not been demonstrated.
Well, you have to be saying that the position that it can pop into existence out of nothing by nothing is more rational than the idea that it can't.
No, because I'm not talking about nothing. I'm talking about cosmos. I have no problem with the idea that when no, we're not. I've never spoken about nothing until this point in the conversation.
No. If my premise holds true about it all beginning, then before that there was nothing. That's why, I'm I'm not necessarily buying that. Plus, this idea, and I'll be sitting down with Lawrence Krauss in June in Toronto, and I'm what? I have tickets to that. Cool. So we'll be able to talk about this universe from nothing, because one of the things is that when physicists talk about nothing, they're talking about a zero energy state, not nothing as in ex nihilo, no thing. I've never, and I'm going to borrow from Tracy here. That wasn't me. Or was it? I don't know. Nope. Anyway, I'm going to borrow from Tracy here. I see nothing isn't something you could act upon or do anything to. I don't see how even if there was a God that could from nothing produce something. You can't interact, you can't act upon nothing. I've never had a nothing to investigate, and I don't see any problem with the idea that there never has been nothing. Okay. So, I just find the idea that it could literally come from absolutely nothing to be a bit absurd. Well, that's because you're assuming that there's a nothing that something could act on. Maybe if you dump that and start to recognize that maybe there's the possibility that there's never been a nothing, that there couldn't be a nothing, that be nothing is itself a contradiction, then maybe you'd see passages. I think that the first premise establishes that the Borguth-Vilankin theorem, the impossibility of infinite, all that, the Vilankin quote, all that would show that what we're talking about is absolutely nothing. I don't accept that it gets us to the idea that behind it all is absolutely nothing, but if it does, that also precludes a God. Nothing that is made up of any sort of is an entity something. Yeah, but it exists apart from matter. It's immaterial. I don't.
Now we're back to special pleading.
No, because you're talking about quantum fields and all that. But that's
actually, I wasn't.
Nothing,
we're not, and you're not either.
I'm not sure I understand.
So here's the situation. We can't explore the origins of our universe, and we can't explore any portion of a cosmos, whether it exists or not, beyond our universe. So at best, we can engage in supposition.
Supposition?
Yeah. So we look at this and say, I just can't believe that something could possibly come from nothing. What the hell is that? But I can't believe that something could come from nothing. But I'm quite comfortable believing that there's something magical, something transcendent, timeless, immaterial entity that caused something to come from nothing. And the only way you can get there is by committing an argument from ignorance fallacy of saying, I don't know what it could be the explanation for the origins, but if I define something and say it doesn't, it's immaterial, it's timeless, it's all of these things, if I define this thing and claim that it is sufficient to bring about a universe, well, then I've solved the problem. And my response to that is, no, you haven't.
Hello?
Hello?
Oh, okay, thank you.
Sure. On that note, we have...
I'm wondering when the destroying is supposed to happen, because he said he was going to destroy us in the chat.
I guess. The thing is, we look at the universe, we can't get beyond the Planck time. We're talking about time as we understand it, began with our universe, under the best models. I'm not necessarily convinced that that's the case, but I'm certainly willing to accept that time as we understand it is a function of our universe.
Yeah.
Matter in motion. That tells me nothing about what might be beyond our universe. That there might be other universes with other times, that there might not be other universes, that there might be a cosmos that has its own thing that we might call time, or that time might not exist, or that there's nothing like along those lines. So we have this big problem. We don't have an explanation for why there's something rather than nothing.
Yeah.
That's huge. And for a species that thrives on going out and finding the answers, to think about us here in the 21st century when we've got computers and instant communication and we know so much and we know we've gotten past this, well, we've supposedly gotten past this flat earth idea, even though it's getting a resurgence from some folks. But, you know, we used to think that the sun went around the earth, and now we know that that's better, and we can send out probes and space vessels, and we can explore and we learn more. And then we get down to the very, very small, and we learn more about the atoms. Our fear of not knowing the answer encourages us to accept answers before they are sufficiently justified. That's how we came to think that lightning bolts came from the gods before we understood electricity. That's how we came to think that dancing around and spreading a chicken's blood around will heal somebody or make it rain.
Or lamb's blood on the doorpost will keep your firstborn from dying.
Getting to the point where you acknowledge that you don't have sufficient evidence to justify a particular conclusion is the beginning of finding the correct answer rather than just accepting whatever answer comes along. And I get it. It is, when you look at this, you're like, I just can't believe this could have all come from nothing. And then you have physicists who are saying it did. And yet when they talk about nothing, they don't mean nothing in the same way that you do. And then you have other physicists say that ultimately we can't have an infinite regress. We can't have an infinite regress. And yet what are they proposing as a solution? Something that is eternal, which is just another word for infinite.
Right.
Oh, no. Infinite and eternal are different because eternal is outside of time. It's not bound by time. Cool. How can you demonstrate that something can in fact exist with no ties to time when existence is necessarily temporal? Something that exists for 0 seconds isn't eternal. Because if it is, then the rainbow-colored uniform that farts frosted cupcakes is eternal. It's existed for 0 seconds. It's eternal.
And you can't prove that it's not.
And by the way, you atheists are just proposing that the universe popped into existence. No, I'm not proposing to have any explanation for the origin of the universe. What I'm saying is the people who are running around claiming to believe that a God exists haven't made their burden of proof, haven't made the case sufficient to convince me. And if you're going to call in, as he did, and I understand why you're convinced of this, but he wasn't arguing for the God, any God, that the overwhelming majority of people believe in. This is the most damning thing about theism. There are people sitting out in the pews in church every Sunday who believe that Jesus was raised from the dead, came down as atonement for their sins, and that their acceptance of this, by God's grace, will get them to a better afterlife. There are people who believe that Muhammad was the last prophet of God who revealed the most important truths to develop the religion of Islam. There are people who believe that the Xenu, the ancient warrior, threw people into volcanoes and really hates psychiatrists. There are people who have beliefs about a God. And yet, people will call in and say, oh, well, what I mean by God is something that is timeless, eternal, blah, 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 describing qualities that are not accurately understood, that have all sorts of problems, that are beyond human comprehension. You cannot possibly comprehend eternity properly. You can at best comprehend an abstraction of this. When I was a believer, the God that I believed in was as real as the trees outside, which is why I'm happier to have people call the show to say, look at the trees, because at least they're making a teleological argument. At least they are engaged in something that ties to what people ultimately believe. The caller that just called in doesn't tie to anything that anybody really believes unless we strip away everything tied to every religion. And then what you have is an abstraction that you can't demonstrate, that you can't understand, and yet you're claiming is more probable than not Probability is a calculation, and it is based on prior evidence. How many other universes are you able to explore? None. How many cosmoses are you able to explore? None, unless the universe and the cosmos are synonymous, which we don't know. How many gods can you demonstrate? By his own admission, none. You want to talk about verbal and mental masturbation? Professional apologists desperately seeking to justify their unjustified and unjustifiable, potentially, beliefs are engaged in the most inane, twisting, oh, it must be this because we can't think of anything else, fallacy. It must be this because you can't prove the other one wrong, fallacy. Well, it must be this because based on what we understand, this isn't possible, fallacy. What you understand is not equivalent to what is or isn't possible or impossible. Possibility and impossibility need to be demonstrated, and the rest of it is just talking out of your ass. Happy Easter. We'll see you next week. Brandon in Phoenix, how are you?
Yeah, hey Matt, how are you?
It says here, can I mention what the call screener note was?
Yeah, go for it.
Brandon wants to present evidence of God and guarantees this will be the best show ever if his call is taken this time.
Wow. Wow. We're in awe, man. Go for it.
Well,
I cede the floor.
Let me start by just kind of to stage things. Let me ask you if for example, I had buried $30 million worth of gold, and I approached you with the proposition that if you help me dig up this gold, which I've stamped to prove that it's my gold, it's got my name on it and all of that, and I guaranteed you that you were going to get 30% of the take for helping me dig it up, would you want me to draw up a contract to our agreement?
Yes.
Now, why would you want me to draw up a contract?
Because it has legal protection in the case that you try to screw me on the deal after.
So basically, I mean, in short, so that the story doesn't change after we dig up the gold, right?
I suppose you can phrase it that way, sure. But the real thing is that I'm not as concerned.
I can't come back and I only told you 5%, not 30%.
Sure, yeah, okay, well, that's a version of the story. I'm just saying that I would do it because there's legal protection there to keep me from getting screwed.
Right. So,
but before I grab a shovel, you're going to have to actually demonstrate that the gold's real, because I'm just going to, basically I would
that was
probably
my next
also.
point is you have no idea if I actually buried anything, so you'd kind of have to take my word on faith.
No, because the contract.
I actually buried.
No, I don't have to take your word on faith for anything, because the contract would be written in such a way that if you have $30 million in gold and you're going to give me 30% of it, well, let's just say $10 million to make the math easier. You got $30 million in gold, and if I help you dig it up, I'm going to get $10 million in gold. What's going to happen is you're going to guarantee me payment of $10 million for digging X amount, because I'm not just going to keep digging holes with you forever. There's going to be a description of what the actual job is and what the payment's going to be, and an agreement. It doesn't matter then whether or not you actually have gold, because I'm either getting my money or I'm going to take everything you've got, suing you afterwards for breach of contract. And now I don't have to believe your story.
You're a smart business guy, and I mean, I would like to state that, intellectually, I think you absolutely dwarf me. If you and I took an IQ,
that doesn't matter.
I mean, you would absolutely have a higher IQ than I do. So, but
I don't care about IQ.
The one thing I've got on my side is actual wisdom, being in the truth.
And see, I would say that wisdom.
Conversation.
I would say that wisdom is exactly the sort of thing that would make you design the sort of contract that I'm doing, because wisdom is about lessons learned and having an understanding of reality. That would be wisdom. IQ doesn't matter. You could have 80 points lower IQ than me, but if you've learned the lesson about how to not get screwed, you can still write the same contract. So I would say that is wisdom. Right. Wouldn't you say it's a wise contract?
Contract is simply that, we put things in writing so that the words can't change. So that's, kind of why, the Old Testament and the New Testament is also referred to as the Old Covenant and the New Covenant.
Yeah, it's curious. It's curious that
why.
Go ahead.
The God that I'm trying to prove, why He put everything in writing is so that the story can't change.
How do you know God put everything in writing?
And why did he need to amend it?
Well, as far as, I mean, the purpose of amending it is, I mean, ultimately in the Old Testament, he told the Jews that I bring you a curse this day, that the law is a curse to them. So, and this is also why Jesus said salvation comes through the Jews. He's going to use these people who, you know, went with Moses out of Egypt.
Can we stop preaching and move to the proof of God?
So first of all, you're supposed to be presenting proof of God. And second of all, this notion of we write things down so that it can't change, that's separate. But
well, I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna circle back around to that. So, but
I guarantee you're going to do a lot of circling because it's already you're beginning with essentially a circular argument that we need to rely on the Bible because it is the words that were written down so it couldn't change. And yet the issue is, how do you know that anything in the Bible is true and accurate with respect to what you're going to claim about God?
Well, I mean, let me start here. As far as, you know, I mean, over 75% of all scholars and historians can agree that Jesus of Nazareth was a real person.
Well, okay, so first of all, 93% of all statistics are pulled right out of somebody's ass at the time that they need to use them. But the percentage the percentage of people who believe that Jesus was real is irrelevant to whether or not he was real. And even if everybody believed that Jesus was a real person, that doesn't mean that we have evidence that he was divine or God. I believe there were lots of real people.
But I agree. I mean, as far as, you know, that's not proof yet. That
so everything you said is irrelevant to the point of demonstrating that God exists. That's my point.
Okay, well, I mean, and we do know that he was crucified.
Well, we know that the Bible claims that he was crucified. It's not like we have any evidence of a crucifixion outside of the Bible. Well, we don't even have any evidence.
Modern scholars all agree that, you know, we have
Brandon. Oh my God. No, we don't. No, we don't. And modern scholars don't actually agree on that. What they agree is there are stories about this. The truth is we have no contemporary accounts of any event from Jesus' life at all, which is why there are some people who think this is entirely a myth. I'm not making that argument. But if you're just going to come on here and say, oh, 75% of scholars agreed that he was a person, and most modern scholars agree that he was crucified, none of that matters. Because let me just concede for the sake of this argument, Brandon, let's just assume I believe Jesus existed and was crucified.
Okay.
I don't actually believe that's the case.
Your debate that you did between Bart Ehrman and Bob Price. So, I mean,
I wasn't involved in that. I mean, they had the debate. I'm saying for the purposes of this discussion right here, let's just pretend that I believe that Jesus existed and that he was crucified. Neither of those things, neither of those have any relevance, any bearing on whether or not there's a God.
Well, I mean, you know, but he claimed that he was God, and that's why he was crucified.
Okay,
I agree.
Brandon, were there other people who were killed for heresy? Were there other people who went around claiming they were God? Okay, so were those people God?
No.
Okay, so doesn't that mean this is irrelevant that somebody claimed they were God and were killed for it?
Well, I mean, I'm getting to that because, see, I mean, God did something very...
You've got to get to it a lot better than just starting... You've got to get to this a lot better than just starting with a parade of things that are irrelevant. What is the proof, the evidence that God exists?
That he did, the proof that he provided us to prove his claim that he was God is, number one, prophecy in the Bible. And then number two is the fact that, you know, I mean, the works that he did, the miracles that he did that convinced all of these other people that, I mean, this is, you know, not a normal person can't do these things. A normal person
I agree.
Just
I agree. I agree. Now, please demonstrate that he actually did any of the things that are reported.
Well, I mean, if you, you know, I'm just going to give you the elevator version.
Why don't you give us the best one?
Why don't you give us evidence? Because it says here that you're going to present evidence, and you presented nothing but claims. So present evidence. Do you even know what evidence is?
Yeah, let me get there. As far as, you know, we do know scholars all agree that the book of Daniel was written between 603 and 606 BC. That's when that book was written. And in this, it was given the prophecy that the Messiah, Jesus, was going to come and enter into the streets of Jerusalem.
That's false.
In exactly 600 or 483 years.
Brandon, that's false. It doesn't say Jesus in Daniel.
Well, it says the Messiah.
Okay, but you said the Messiah, Jesus. You are dishonestly injecting Jesus into a potential prophecy here because you've already concluded that he does this. But if a book says our future Messiah will do this, does that mean that later on, if somebody does that, that they are in fact the Messiah?
Well, I mean, it's pretty accurate as far.
No, that's not what I'm asking.
The book of Daniel.
I'm not asking. So here's a statement. Somebody makes a statement about a future event. If later on that future event comes true, what does that tell us about the prophecy?
That the prophet was absolutely true in what he was saying.
It tells us that they said something which came true. But does that mean that the prophet actually predicted this? Did they knowingly set up a scenario that they knew was going to happen?
Well, I mean, in the book of Daniel, the angel Gabriel came to Daniel and said, in 483 years, the Messiah is going to walk through the gates of Jerusalem and will be recognized as the Messiah. And then, I mean, and that's exactly 173,880 days.
So let's say
the day Jesus entered into Jerusalem.
So let's say
mass,
Jesus Christ. Let's say that 3 days before Jesus entered Jerusalem, assuming that's actually what happened, did somebody have access to the book of Daniel at that time?
Absolutely, the Jewish people. They're historians. That's why God used them.
So if I go in to a restaurant and I order a steak medium rare, and I get a steak that's medium rare, have I made a prediction and the waiter fulfilled prophecy?
Well, I mean, that's a prediction. That's something, you know,
prophecy is a prediction.
Prediction are two different things.
No, they're not.
Things that are different.
No, they're not.
The same.
They're not the same. Prophecy and prediction are synonyms. You are saying this is going to happen in the future, and then it happens.
Absolutely. We're talking many, many years in the future, though.
What difference does that make?
The person that made the prediction died before the thing ever.
I'll tell you exactly what difference it makes. It means that there were 683 years for people to actively work towards that goal, knowing it was going to happen. If I say 1 year from today, somebody is going to give birth to a child, and they are going to name it Matt is Awesome. And a year to the day from now, somebody actually names their kid Matt is Awesome. Was that prophecy being fulfilled? Or was that somebody saying, hey...
The prophecy said that he would be called Emmanuel. They gave him the prophecy gave him Jesus a different
not
name.
Jesus, right?
Not Jesus. In the New Testament, he's not referred to as Emmanuel.
The meaning of Emmanuel is God with us, to another way to prove that Jesus is God as he claimed.
So
that's what he said.
Jesus
that's why
Christ.
They killed him.
We have a number of big problems here. One is that you believe everything in the Bible.
Well, let me just say this. As far as I believe that the King James Bible is the only real Bible that fulfilled the prophecy given in Psalms 12.
And I'm assuming you're talking about these. I'm assuming
in the trash.
I'm assuming you're talking about the 1611 AV version only, right?
Correct. The standard authorized Cambridge edition Bible.
Well, that's the standard authorized Cambridge edition. May not be the exact same thing as the 1611 authorized version, is it?
Well, I mean, that's the real Bible.
Get your story straight.
Is you can take all the other Bibles and trash them.
Sure, even the Bibles that was based on, that the interpretations came out of, even the Masoretic text and the Septuagint, you can chuck those in the trash.
We'll see.
What about the Dead Sea Scrolls? What about the Dead Sea? What about the Dead Sea Scrolls? You're going to chuck those in the trash too?
Absolutely.
Okay.
As far as, this is where...
So Brandon, we're done.
God made it
Brandon,
you're a cartoon, man.
Brandon, we're done. You have a ridiculous position. You have a ridiculous position. Here, no. I'm not holding on. You're holding on. You're on hold right now. I might bring you back. I might not. In 1611, a new version of the Bible was translated from a number of different texts. And your thing is, we can toss out all those things that it was based on and just go with this one, as if the Lord himself spoke English. As if these people who translated it have even a fraction of the understanding of the ancient languages and the context at the time as modern scholars do. That makes no sense. This is you not just cherry picking from the Bible, but cherry picking the Bible.
Well, I don't mean to. I'm not trying to cherry pick. I understand your point, and it's a good point. I'm just saying that, I mean, obviously, God. If God is God, then He's capable of speaking any language that He wants to.
Sure. Isn't He also capable? Isn't He also capable of revealing Himself to all of us right now?
He has. This is the point. This is where I'm.
No, He hasn't. God has never revealed Himself to me. I can say that with confidence.
Nor me.
Well, He's not going to physically reveal Himself to you.
Can He not do that?
Because of our nature versus.
Can He do that? Can He do it or not?
Without destroying you, no.
Then how did He reveal Himself to anybody else? How did He explain the Damascus Road experience? Isn't that a revelation directly to Saul?
Absolutely, and as far as
it didn't destroy him, did it?
This is,
did it destroy him?
Those are chosen vessels, and apostles have a specific.
Okay, look, oh my God, you're just making all kinds of excuses. I said, can God do this? And you said, not without destroying you. And then I pull up an example where you have to believe, because it's in your book, that God revealed Himself to somebody without destroying. And now you come up with a post hoc rationalization that He was a chosen vessel. Can God make me a chosen vessel?
Of course, I think He has.
Why hasn't He?
If you actually
wait,
well, then we're back to square one.
No.
Why doesn't He do it?
Because now you just said that you think God has made me a chosen vessel, but you said that God couldn't reveal Himself to destroy without destroying me. And then when I asked what it would take, I would say, why could it happen to Saul? And you said because He was a chosen vessel. So if I'm a chosen vessel, then clearly God can reveal Himself to me without destroying me, right? So the answer to my original question was yes, He can.
Sure, of course. I mean,
and yet He hasn't.
If you were to be an apostle, which their function has already been served, it's done.
So apostles have to believe before the revelation?
No, I mean, but see,
okay, so then
apostles are different from prophets.
No, Brandon.
As far as they set down doctrine.
Brandon,
prophets tell
shut up.
Events.
You're not following this. You've said I'm a vessel, and that God can reveal Himself to me. And then when I say, why hasn't He? You say it's because I'm not an apostle. And I'm asking, do you have to be apostle before that you get the revelation? And your answer is no. So it's irrelevant to why I haven't received the revelation yet. Don't you think that if God considers me a vessel and reveals Himself to me, that perhaps I might become an apostle?
Well, no, because I mean the apostleship is already done. There won't be any more apostles.
So then God can't reveal Himself to me because I can't become an apostle, right?
Well, no. He has.
No, He hasn't.
Here on earth right now. See,
Brandon.
Sorry.
God has not revealed Himself to me. Period. Full stop.
Well, let me explain how He's done this. Except you just don't see it yet.
Oh my God, Brandon. Brandon. How can it be possible that something has been revealed to you and yet you don't see it? That the process of revelation intrinsically includes the recognition of the observer. This is something different from, hey, there is evidence for something and you just haven't seen it yet, versus I have revealed this evidence to you and you don't see it.
Well, I mean, have you ever, like lost your glasses or something and they're just sitting right in front of your...
Goodbye.
I'm constantly disappointed about these folks that say, hey, I've got proof of God, and they come on and nothing.
Have you lost your glasses? Yep. And you know what found them? Looking for the glasses. When it was revealed to me what their location was, by my eyes and my searching, not by some external spirit, I found my glasses. This sort of nonsensical, simplistic, hey, I lost my glasses, I prayed for help, and then I found my glasses. Okay, what did the prayer have to do with it? Yeah. Nothing.
Well, didn't Jesus prophesy that He'd be returning within a generation?
Not necessarily. He didn't put a time frame on it, but He said there are some standing here who will not taste of death until all these things have come to pass, which can be interpreted that way, and it can be interpreted another way.
I'm pretty sure there's a quote where He says within a generation.
There are things about that within this generation, but that it's all subject to interpretation. It's a big mess.
It's a big mess.
But at the end of the day, this notion of prophecy, I've already done a video on prophecy. We already talked about it over and over again. The fact that the book of Daniel says something that you look at events later and interpret them as if they fit that. I tell you what, instead of calling the Atheist Experience, go call the Jewish Experience and explain to them why they're wrong to not recognize Jesus as the predicted Messiah. Because they believe in the prophecy, I don't. And you think the prophecy's been fulfilled, and they don't. So when the two of you sort out what's the actual truth about prophecy, then call back. And when you can get atheists and Jews to say, yes, we agree this is prophecy and it was fulfilled, but we still don't believe in Jesus. Whatever.
Scared.
Okay, I'll make this easier. Jamie's far less scary than I am. So
and he said I get to talk more.
I'll let him talk. You don't have anything to be scared of.
Yeah, I'm nice.
Well, I listened to that last call, and I feel like I'll be honest, a friend of mine dared me to call y'all. She said y'all were real nice. My question, I guess, was just, I don't understand how anyone could be an atheist. I mean, I live my life, I try to live my life, to serve God and to be a good person. And when she said, oh, well, I talked to these atheists, I said, ow. Yeah. I don't know. So I don't know what.
Have you called the show before? Maybe?
Pardon me?
Have you called the show before?
No,
okay.
I hadn't heard of y'all.
Oh, okay. You sound a little bit familiar. Okay, so you say that you don't understand how anyone can be an atheist. To be clear... Oh, sorry?
Go ahead.
Well, no, to be clear, when I say I am an atheist, for example, I mean there's a bunch of people saying this God exists, that God exists, Yahweh, Jehovah, Allah, Vishnu, and I say I don't see it. Is that what you're saying, or you're saying people that run around and set cars on fire and attack churches? Because I've heard that as well.
Is that what you do?
No. I just wanted to clarify, because that one of those two things is a lot more unbelievable and outrageous.
But what do you mean by
atheist? Yeah.
Someone who doesn't believe in God.
Okay. Yeah. So are you wondering, like, I was a believer before, are you wondering how I got to where I am, or would that be a helpful thing for me to tell you about?
Yeah,
maybe?
yeah.
Okay. So for most of my life, I believed that a God exists, that it was the God of the Bible, vaguely. I was baptized and raised as an Episcopalian.
You would...
I mean...
A high church.
Yeah. Are you what denomination are you?
Well, I heard Matt say Southern Baptist, but I'm Independent Baptist.
Oh, you heathen. No, I'm just kidding. I actually, and I'm going to let Jamie go, but I actually would occasionally go to Pentecostal churches because they had better concerts. Like you could go see Carmen and Petra and stuff like that.
You heathen.
But I was also, I wasn't just Southern Baptist. I was primarily Southern Baptist, but we went to other churches on occasion as well. But, yeah.
Well, yeah, you go to the gospel churches for the best music.
Yeah. Well, sorry, I brought it up because there's a whole series of jokes like, oh, if you're a Baptist, but on the weekends you can be a Methodist because you want to have a drink. But if you really want to get wild, then, for a weekend you're an Episcopalian because then you can dance and have a drink and, whatever. But, no, so I was baptized and raised as an Episcopalian, right? So we would always go Easter and Christmas, but oftentimes we'd go as well, in between, just regular Sundays. And recently I've had to look back and be like, how religious was I when I was, religious? Like, how devout was I? Because it seems weird for me now to get into that mindset. And I found a whole series of prayers that I'd written down. And actually, after I went to Catholic high school, I started collecting rosaries because that kind of thing seemed really cool to me. So I believed devoutly, I prayed, etc. And then after a while, I bumped into some ideas and some questions. Okay, well, what is a reliable way of determining what's true, right? If someone stole the cookie from the cookie jar, how do you actually figure out who it is so that all the kids in the class will stop singing that annoying repetitive song, right? You investigate and you figure out if they've got chocolate on their hands, right? But what I found was the only time when I said, oh, okay, how do I figure out what's true? I kneel, I pray, and I think about what's going on in my head. The only time I used that method to figure out what's true was on questions of God. And that was the only method I could use. And then I thought about, okay, well, we have cars and machines, and we have, amazingly, fantastic planes and computers. How did we determine how, electricity works, how we can design a plane that weighs, I don't know how unbelievably heavy planes are, it's like several tons, that flies through the air and carries people with it? How did we figure that out? And I realized, okay, well, we studied things that we could observe, and we tested them, and we improved it, and we tested them, and we improved it, and we tested them, and we improved it, right? 100 years ago, if you went into a university and you went into the science department, or you went into even mathematics, or, literature, you'd have an extra 100 years of literature now, right? You could go back and be like, hey, guys, here's this information from 100 years ago. It's all updated. It's all new. If you took information from a theology department today and you went back 100 years, you would have nothing new to tell them. Which kind of tells me about whether or not the methods being used to figure this out have evolved or developed or found anything new. And given that they contradict each other, it sort of didn't lend any credibility to, well, okay, how did you come to this conclusion that there is a God, right? Like particularly in mathematics, they can say, oh, here's why 2 + 2 = 4. Here's a giant logical proof for why 1 + 1 = 2, and it's a huge breakthrough. Oh, how do you know that this is what makes, baking soda and vinegar expand? You can test it, you can figure it out, you can look at things on a microscopic level. Nothing like that exists for God. And humans all over the world come to very, very, very different conclusions about God. Oftentimes, 2 people that go to the same church. People all over the world, oftentimes 2 people that go to the same church or live in the same house, come to very, very different conclusions about who to vote for, what their favorite movie is, what's fashionable, what's not, what the best food is. So if I'm looking at the way that people determine whether or not a God exists, it looks a lot like people trying to figure out what they like. And I know I've gone a little bit off the rails here and talked for a long period of time. But
for me, it's just, I'm much like Jamie. Mm-hmm. I'm not convinced. I am, in fact, convinced that some of them are wrong and hopefully demonstrably so. But I realize there's countless claims about different gods. They can't all be correct, but they could all be wrong. I'm not assuming that all of them are wrong. But of the many, how do I go about figuring out which, if any of these, are correct or even likely to be correct? And not to be glib, but I can probably, not off the top of my head, but I could probably come up with a list of 1,000 gods you don't believe in. And, the old joke is that atheists just go one God further. But the other aspect of this is that Jews think that Christians are wrong. Christians think that Muslims are wrong. Muslims think that Hindus are wrong. We are agreeing with all of them, and we are baffled that any one person could reasonably justify saying, nope, this is the right one. And the old joke, which has nothing to do with this, is that Jews don't recognize Jesus, Protestants don't recognize the Pope, and Baptists don't recognize each other in the liquor store.
Well, I mean, I know that, and I'm trying to follow y'all.
Sorry,
I know that my God is real. My grandson, when he was 2, he had a tumor on his pituitary gland. And
I'm sorry
they
to hear
didn't
that.
want to treat it. They did the MRA. MRI.
MRI. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
And they did another one 6 months later. It was the same size, and they did another one 6 months after that, and it had shrunk. And they didn't. They literally did not do any treatment. And I don't know how that's possible without God. We were all praying for him and hoping he would be well, and he's doing real well now. And the last time they did the MRI, it had disappeared. I mean, I've seen miracles in my own life that, how else could that be?
So, well,
are you going to, well, which...
So
which
one of the things is, there are parts of the story that I have difficulty believing, that they're repeatedly doing MRIs and there's no treatment. But that may be the case. But we know that cancer goes into remission.
No, he was too young.
That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. I'm not saying you're lying. I'm saying that I'm getting the second hand, so I'm trying to explain. Mm-hmm. We know that cancer goes into remission. We know that tumors shrink. You started by saying you know your God is real, and then you went to the story about your 2-year-old was a grandson, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what you said about that is, I don't know how that could happen without God. That is a claim that is not, I know God did this. It's, I can't come up with any other explanation other than God. And yet there's no demonstration that there is a God, could be a God, or that a God could do this. There's a logical fallacy involved in your reasoning that is, I can't think of any other explanation, so I'm going to go with this one. And even if you could do that to say, you know, hey, my dog came in wet. I don't know how that could happen unless it was raining. Granted, I know that your neighbor could have turned a hose on it or whatever else, or could have gone swimming. But to say that I don't know how that could happen if it's not raining is not in any way confirmation that it's raining. It's a mistake in reasoning. Mm-hmm. And so people can forever talk about the anecdotes of somebody had this illness, we prayed and it got better. Mm-hmm. The problem is, how do you demonstrate that the prayer had anything to do with it, or that there was a God who answered that prayer specifically? Because we've tested intercessory prayer, and it works at the rate of chance, or worse. When people actually know they're being prayed for, it works less.
Performance anxiety,
so
probably. These
personal anecdotes of, hey, I saw this and I don't have an explanation for it, awesome. Then the correct answer is you don't have an explanation for it. But you're trying to simultaneously say, I don't have an explanation, therefore it must be God. And that's how we got to every time somebody has offered God as an explanation, and we've gone on to find the actual explanation, the answer was never God. Not once.
I don't know what you mean by intercessory prayer.
Me praying for Matt, like praying for another person, praying that God intercede on their behalf. Sorry, just to clarify.
So you don't think that works?
We know it doesn't work. It's been tested.
Yeah, when we've examined, we've found indicates that it does not change what happens in the world.
It doesn't matter who's praying, what God they're praying to. You could flip a coin, and it would be heads or tails, just as good an indicator as to whether or not you're going to see any improvement that somebody's prayed over.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just don't. That doesn't make any sense to me. I
understand that.
So.
I mean, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No. You were in the middle of a.
I've lost a lot of people in my life, and God has told me I'm going to meet them someday again. And my grandson Andrew is healthy today, and
so I don't know
how you can say that wasn't God.
Well, we're not saying it wasn't God. We're saying there's no reason to think it was God. That's different. But how does God tell you that you're going to meet these people again?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, this is one of the things about the language when we start talking about God, and this is not a problem with you, man. And I can appreciate, having at least somewhat been there, the idea that you've been convinced most of your life that someday you're going to go to heaven and you're going to be reunited with all your loved ones and everything's going to be wonderful. And the very idea that this might not be true is not just potentially terrifying, it can be almost traumatizing. And I think this is one of the disservices. Yeah, and oh gosh, I'm no good when people cry. I think this is one of the disservices.
No, I didn't. I was just thinking about my sister. I lost my sister when I was 13, and that I'd see her again, and I always believed I would.
This is one of the things where I think religions have done a disservice to all of us, because death is a natural part of life. And what religions have done, it's awful. And what religions have done is put death in a context that eases people's frustration, anxiety, mourning by propping up a story, oh, I'll get to meet them again. Now, even if that were true, which we not only don't have good reason to think is true, there's good reason to think that there's no such thing as a soul or anything that of me that could exist anywhere else. But if instead we told people that we have no good reason to think that there's an afterlife, that gets people to focus on treating people right in this life and making the most of it and valuing it, so that when death comes, apart from instances where it's just a surprise shock, I can't imagine a parent losing a child, but it helps us to deal with it better. And if it turns out then that there's an afterlife anyway,
bonus.
Okay, it's a bonus, but at least not depending on the afterlife encourages us to do better in our interactions in the one and only life that we know we get.
I'm sorry, what did you mean that I didn't treat her right?
He wasn't. No, not you specifically. He's not saying that you didn't treat your sister right.
Yeah.
He's saying that in general, if you tell people this life that you have where you're bumping into other people on the street, that's the only life that you're going to have, that's the only life that they're going to have, and you bump into them and a person just not you, sorry. If Steve bumps into Bob and Steve cusses out Bob and they go their separate ways and Steve goes, I really shouldn't have done that. Well, when I see him in heaven, then I'll make it right.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about you. There are people who whose one of their concerns about this is, I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't tell them I love them enough. It's not about mistreating. Oh, well, I'll get to make up for that later. If you don't think you get to make up for it later, you tell people you love them more. You show that you appreciate them more. You exercise a bit more patience, or at least you can. Not everybody's going to.
Yeah, a person, not you specifically.
When after I was 13 when she died, so that was really hard. And I talked to a friend of mine was Catholic, and I went to church with her one time, and I told the Catholic priest, because I was real sad, and I told him about what happened, and my sister committed suicide. So, and he told me she was in hell. Or no, he didn't say it that way. He said that
he said something to those effect, which is another example of how religion
she couldn't be in paradise or whatever.
So that explains why you're not Catholic.
And I yelled at her the last time I saw her.
Yeah.
But
this is the thing, and it actually gets worse than this. It's not just about propping up what is almost certainly false hope. It fundamentally changes the way we interact with people. And yet, here's the thing. There are countless different views about an afterlife. If the Catholics are right, maybe you don't meet up. Oh, and by the way, if the Catholics are right and you're not a Catholic, you're not going to meet up with anybody anyway.
Yeah.
And so
we can hang out.
I hear from atheists who've been longtime atheists, and yet they're still concerned about fears of a hell, the hell they were indoctrinated into. And the answer that I tend to give is, how much time do you spend worrying about the hells of other religions that you weren't brought up believing in? My thing is, as an atheist, I don't have any reason to think that anything about me will survive my death. I don't think there's a soul. I don't think there's an afterlife. And I could spend my entire life sad and miserable and depressed about the fact that I'm not going to get to go be with Jesus or whoever or meet my loved ones again. And all that would do is make my life worse. If in fact this is the only life that I get, which is what the evidence points to so far, then it's in my best interest to not dwell on the way things aren't, but to focus on, as best I can, the way things are. And this is why the kind of ancient notions of some religions, I think, are poisoning our interpersonal relationships, to the point where if you don't believe what I believe, and let me take that out of you and me. There are parents who disown their children if they identify that they're an atheist. We have to find new homes for them. I don't care if my...
I would never do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't either, and good for you. If my child turned out to be a serial killer, I would say all day long that they were absolutely horrible, that they'd done horrible things and were in fact terrible people, and yet I would still love my kid. And yet, merely for disagreements about not just whether or not there is a God, but which God's the right God, which afterlife's the right life. Should men be able to have sex with each other? Should women be able to have sex with each other? Which is less objectionable generally, which I find kind of hypocritical. But all of these things that drive us apart tend to come from religious ideas that nobody can prove. Oh, well, it's just opinion, dude. Yes, but you're legislating your opinion and you're treating other people based on that opinion. Doesn't that matter? What people believe matters. And I think religions not only can't demonstrate that they're true, but I think that they've done a great deal of harm and are continuing to do so. But
does that make any sense?
Well, yeah. So I think y'all were real nice. I mean, but here, I mean, bottom line, if I believed I would never see my sister and my brother again, I don't think I could bear it. And
that's my objection to religion.
Y'all are talking logic. Y'all are talking logic, and
well, I think also we're talking humanism, because this is my objection to religion. Yeah. If in fact you had grown up with the understanding that death was almost certainly the end, you would have the tools to bear it. But because religions have convinced you that this is the case, they haven't equipped you with the tools to mourn properly, to take stock of life, because I've lost people that I love, and I can continue my life. And I'm going to be sad. I'm going to miss them. I'm going to miss the interactions with them. But life is its own reward. And if I look at the time that I spend with them as the reward, then instead of focusing on some reward in an afterlife, then everything about my interactions are better.
I'm sorry, what kind of tools do you mean? I don't...
Well, oh, sorry, Amanda. Finish your thought. I didn't mean to jump on...
I said, what kind of tools do you mean? I don't...
Yeah. I mean mental and emotional tools. Mm-hmm. So people deal with loss and grief in many different ways. There are some people who have a more practical view. Like, for example, when my grandfather died, I was pleased, not because I didn't like him, but because he had been in unbelievable suffering for a long time. And I was glad that I had shared...
But you didn't believe he was with his king now.
No, I think he's dead, and I think that's what all the evidence points to.
Okay.
But his situation was so bad that death was preferable to continued suffering. And I still have all those years and all those stories to look back and remember on, and be happy that I was able to share part of my life with him, and not have all of that diminished by not having the idea that I was going to see him again. It's like if you were told from birth till you were 18 that when you were 18 you were going to inherit $1 billion, and you get to 18 and you find out, hey, you're not going to inherit $1 billion. If you spend the rest of your life mourning the fact that you're not getting your $1 billion, the rest of your life is going to be miserable. And I can't throw away life like that, because it's the only life I have.
What do you do with your love for your grandfather?
I still love my grandfather.
You know what I mean? You're missing your...
Yeah. Well, presumably he misses his... I mean, for people, and I've lost, I miss them. But really quickly, if I can circle back around to your statement, if I didn't believe that I was going to see them again, I don't think that I could bear it. Matt and I don't believe that we're going to see our loved ones that have passed away or that have died, I don't think we're going to see them again, but we have tools to bear it. There are resources for this, and even if you continue to believe in a God, the resources that are provided that help Matt and myself process this can also work for you. They don't require non-belief in a God. And given that, you know, even if you're in a stable place where you are like, oh yes, I'll see them again, it's always possible for a person to convert or deconvert. And given that right now, you don't have a view of a way of grieving without God, and that right now you have God, and that in 5 years, rightly or wrongly, you might have a different God or no God that you believe in. I don't want you to, in 5 years, in that circumstance, not have the tools and the processes and the resources that are available to non-believers to grieve.
We're gonna have to wrap up in a minute. Yeah. I'm gonna put you back on hold because I think the screener wanted to say something, but I'll say this. There's one tool that has benefited me, and it works when I believed in God and when I didn't. And that's this. The people that I miss, that I'm mourning, how would they want me to live my life? Would they want me to sit around and miss them, or would they want me to live life to the fullest? And even if my grandfather and he died before I was publicly an atheist, even if he fundamentally disagreed with me, and even if he turned out to be right and he's in heaven, I'm confident that what he wants for me is to not be distraught forever about his death, that I get to go on and I get to laugh and I get to experience new things. And perhaps there are new people who enter my life and they're not loved less or valued less because of the weight of his absence. He would want me perhaps to love them more. As a matter of fact, he'd probably tell me, get over it, you know, and because that's the gruff kind of guy that he was on occasion.
His grandfather.
My grandfather would have been, hey, why are you worried about me? I live to be, you know, in the late 70s or whatever, and you got a wife and you need to worry about that. If you're just going to sit around, what did I teach? I would get a lecture. And so, and I love that. And the fact that I have those memories makes me, it doesn't change the fact that I'm sad that he's gone.
Right.
But I don't have to be miserable that he's not here. And on that note, I apologize. I'm going to put you back on hold so I think the call screener would ask.
I just want to say I didn't think I'd end up crying on the call, but thank you. No, I mean, not those kind of tears.
Yeah.
But
that's what happens.
For being real nice, and I appreciated the conversation.
Thank you so much for calling.
And you know.
Okay, y'all take care. I'll pray for you. That was a joke.
No, I got it.
What will it take for you to start opening your eyes, to start questioning the bullshit everyone around you buys? You think it's any of your business what goes on between my thighs? I wonder when we'll be rid of your
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.